Let there be football. Welcome to Move the Chains. I'm your host, Jonathan Bam Rivers. On my call sheet this week, reality in the NFL, I'm really going to go deep into this. A lot of people like to say perception is reality. I truly believe that reality is reality, and I truly believe that this has been a season for the ages in the NFL thus far. We haven't even hit Week 18 nor the playoffs. And on my Chain Gang Chatter, I'm going to talk about social media questions that have been coming full force, and I think people are losing their minds a little bit, but that's what we're here for, to make sure everybody's calm and to give you my perspective. And in my nonsense narrative, loyalty is typically a good thing, but it could be a huge detriment to a team when they're trying to build for the future. I'm going to tell you about a team I think has been dealing with that for the past 8 or 9 seasons, and a team that may be on the verge if they stay loyal to certain individuals. And last but not least, you've got to respect DeMeco Ryans, because if he were one of the coaches on the offensive side of the football, he'd be viewed as one of the best coaches in football. Enough said. Having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for the opening toss. All right, so, I sit back and I have these conversations and I think, and I say, hey, the NFL season this year has been something that has been unprecedented in my estimation. If somebody asked me to write a book and say, hey, what would you entitle the 2025 NFL season? I would say The Perfect Storm. It's the perfect storm for what we've seen this year. Teams that you consider top-tier teams like the Baltimore Ravens or the Kansas City Chiefs, they're nowhere in the picture at this point in terms of the playoffs, while Baltimore still has an opportunity. I think it had a lot to do with teams being better. I think it has a lot to do with teams putting themselves in position through the draft and through free agency, hiring new coaches. All that matters. But we can't act like injuries don't play a part in it. And I want to show you this graphic of players that have gone down specifically to ACL injuries this year. And listen, this is not a one-type situation where I can point to one thing. I think turf may have something to do with it. I think the fact that contact is minimized in NFL practices nowadays has something to do with it, because what you're doing is, if contact is minimized, then overall work is minimized in terms of cutting and in terms of being able to stop and start. And I think the faster, the bigger, and the stronger these athletes are, the quick twitch fibers that they have, it matters. You saw the season end for Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes getting hurt. Green Bay is in a situation now to where they don't have one of the best defensive players in football. And let me speak to Green Bay right here as I talk about Micah Parsons. I think Micah Parsons is to the Packers what Saquon Barkley is to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he's a margin of error widener. I don't think the Packers are not a Super Bowl contender because they lost Micah Parsons. I just think the Packers have to be better in other areas because of the loss of Micah Parsons. We saw Philadelphia get to the Super Bowl without Saquon Barkley. We saw them lose to a champion in Kansas City that's been to 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls, who have won 3 of them. So it's not like Philadelphia wasn't a championship caliber team before Saquon Barkley. Saquon just made them a little better. And this is not to diminish Saquon Barkley. This is just simply saying that that team was very, very well staffed and very, very well put together. The same thing goes for Green Bay. I'm not understanding why people are looking at the Packers and saying, well, now they're not a Super Bowl contender because Micah Parsons isn't there. They're still a viable option. They can still go to the Super Bowl, whether they're the 1 seed, whether they're the 5 seed. It doesn't matter in my estimation. Another reality that you have to understand is development is predicated on talent. And now I'm talking about Malik Neighbors and the New York Giants. Because you saw what happened with Jackson Dart once Malik Neighbors got hurt. He lost his number 1 threat. Jackson Dart still played pretty well. He still made some mistakes. I'm simply talking about the decision-making of Jackson Dart. Because of what Jackson Dart has done, people are sometimes considering him a liability because of the way that he runs the football, a liability because he doesn't want to change his reckless abandon of a quarterback style, kind of like a Josh Allen was when he was younger. And I understand that mindset. I understand that sentiment. But I also have to make you understand that Malik Neighbors and Cam Scatterboot weren't there for Jackson Dart, so he was limited. Now, Darius Slayton is not a bad option there. Like, they had other talent, okay, Wan'Dale Robinson, so it's not like the Giants didn't have anybody. My point is the development of Jackson Dart was also predicated on whom they drafted before him and also with him. That matters. So in that reality, the Giants may have taken a step back in their development because 2 of their best offensive players weren't able to play, one of them due to an ACL injury. So getting away from ACL injuries, I want to continue this take on the reality of the NFL. And the reality is that you can't always predict what's going to happen. The reality is today's reality may be different from tomorrow's reality. Joe Burrow for the Cincinnati Bengals is viewed by a lot of people as one of the elite quarterbacks in football. I've said this time and time again. Joe Burrow's very good. I don't think he's in the same category with the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes, and the Lamar Jacksons. But I do want to run some video of Joe Burrow and how his outlook is on football at this point in time. Let's run it.
Seem frustrating.
There's just a lot of things going on right now.
Football related, personally?
All the above. If I want to keep doing this, I have to have fun doing it. I've been through a lot, and if it's not fun, then what am I doing it for?
And now there have been subsequent videos, of course, leading up to this point of Joe Burrow saying everybody wants him to not play football, and he just wants to play. And that's what makes Joe Burrow a dog. And remember, Joe Burrow is a dog. I'm not going to debate that. I'm not going to sit here and say he's not great. Joe Burrow is phenomenal. But you have to take some stock into what he's saying here. He said, if I'm not having fun, then what's the purpose, right? And I think that's a reality we all have to say. We sit here and we criticize these athletes and we condemn some of them sometimes. I'm not a criticizer nor condemner of people. I will criticize your game because that's what I'm here to do. That's my job. But I'm simply saying that there are so many things that lead to the performance on the field. And one, I think Joe Burrow's not used to not being good in terms of team success. He's just not. I'm pretty sure he was great in high school. When he got to LSU after transferring from Ohio State, he was good. Even the year they didn't win the national championship and win the Heisman, Joe Burrow was good. So he just had one of those astronomical years. And he's been good since he's been in Cincinnati when he's been healthy, but the team hasn't been, and he's struggled as well. This is another reality. The reality is the Cincinnati Bengals are not an organization that's put together to win a Super Bowl. The reality is Joe Burrow has a lot to do with that in terms of his decision-making and how he wants the team built. And the reality is Cincinnati may be looking at a situation to where they may have to end up trading Joe Burrow to get back to be better if he doesn't want to be there. Now, Joe Burrow has a no-trade clause. What does that look like? All I'm telling you is that NFL this year has been a snap of the fingers different from what it's looked like the past 5 seasons. And even with the Kansas City Chiefs and even with the Baltimore Ravens and even with some of the teams whom you didn't expect to be good this year, I think it's phenomenal for the NFL because it is the model that they created. They want there to be more parity. They want there to be more consistency amongst teams that you saw inconsistency. The question is, will the consistency of those teams previously that have been inconsistent now be the norm, or is it simply the outlier? That's the reality, and that's my vantage point. All right, when we come back from the break, I'll be answering your questions via my Chain Gang chatter. Back on more Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back to Move the Chains. Before I get to answer your questions from the Chain Gang chat, I want to make sure I take this opportunity, as always, to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for being able to host Move the Chains. Secondly, I want to thank you, the fans, for watching. However you support this show, it's truly appreciated. To the best production crew in the business for making sure everything always runs smoothly. Shout out, as always, to the men and women that make sure this show runs the way it should. And you've seen the QR code at the bottom of the screen. If you're interested in taking your life to the next level in terms of being physically, mentally, financially, and spiritually situated, scan that QR code, look at the protection plan, and take those next steps. Having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for my Chain Gang chatter. Man, social media's been crazy. Like I told my producer, I said, man, I need to stop looking at this social media, these questions and things, because people are really like cutthroat. They're cutthroat. And it's funny to me. It's entertaining to me, but it's also an opportunity for me to give you my vantage point and answer these questions. So let's go ahead and hit the first question. All right, who's the MVP in the NFL this year? I don't even think it's close. Like Matthew Stafford, as you can see by the Rams logo there. Hopefully I didn't, spoil it for anybody. Matthew Stafford is the MVP. I don't even care that they just lost to the Seahawks. And I'm not even just saying that because he put up over 400 yards and was phenomenal. This is not a Lifetime Achievement Award for me when it comes to Matthew Stafford. Do you know that Matthew Stafford almost has an 8-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio in 2025? That's stupid. Like 3-to-1, 4-to-1 are exceptional. 8-to-1? So he's not turning the ball over, and he's a huge reason why this team is good and they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender. But I'll say this. I think sometimes we get caught up in, what we weren't expecting to be the reason that an award should be given. The Coach of the Year award, to me, speaks to that. I think people thinking Drake May was an MVP candidate this year is on point. I think people saying that Drake May the past couple of weeks was the odds-on favorite to win the MVP, I never understood it. I didn't understand it because Matthew Stafford has simply been better. Both teams have been phenomenal. and Stafford has been better. I just don't understand what we were arguing there. And I'll say this. I think Matthew Stafford is more deserving of the MVP this year than Josh Allen was last year. I think Lamar Jackson had a better season than Josh Allen, but I think a lot of people were tired of Lamar Jackson because he had already won two. Was Josh Allen deserving of winning an MVP or being a top two? Absolutely. I'm not saying that. I'm not sitting here saying Josh Allen was terrible. He shouldn't have gotten the MVP. I'm simply saying Lamar Jackson, in my estimation, was more deserving. I don't think there's anybody more deserving this year than Matthew Stafford. And it has nothing to do with what he's achieved throughout the duration of his career. It has everything to do with what he's done this year. He's been a boss and a baller, and that's why I think he'll be taking home his first MVP ever. All right, what's the next question we have? What's the biggest reason for the Denver Broncos' success in 2025? And this, to me, is a faulty question, and I love it because there's no one reason why Denver is good. Denver is good for a multitude of reasons, and I think that's what makes them a good football team. Coming into the season, listen, we have to think back to last year. Remember, Denver was a 7 seed last year, and it was because the Chiefs arrested all of their players because they had locked up the 1 seed. I always wonder, if I go back and think about that, what did that do for the Denver Broncos? Even though they went to Buffalo and got stomped in Buffalo in the first round, what did it do for this team? What did it do for Bo Nix? Because Bo Nix is the big reason. He was very inconsistent to start the season, but he's come along and played some very high-level football. Their defense, even though I think they're susceptible to being run against, and people don't talk about this with Denver because they're so great rushing the passer and getting after the quarterback in terms of leading the league in sacks, because they love to play pressure defense and they have a secondary that can play man-to-man, even though they're highly penalized as well. I'm just giving you the full complement of resources when it comes to Denver. But they're a good team because they can overcome those penalties. They can overcome the ability to not stop the run at times. Although they can be a hindrance, I think Denver is good because they're very well coached. I think they're good because they play to their defense. I think they're good because they're a team that can come back. They're one of the best teams in the fourth quarter in terms of point differential. So it's not one reason the Denver Broncos are good. It's a multitude of reasons, and that's why they're currently the best team in the AFC in terms of holding the 1 seed. All right, what's my last question of the day? Will Raheem Morris return in 2026? Listen, I talked to so many Falcons fans where I am here in Georgia. I think he will return. I don't think the Falcons will fire Raheem Morris, and if they do, it would make me question the hiring of Raheem Morris in the first place. And this is what I'll say. Remember the coach you had in the building twice during the offseason. Remember you had Bill Belichick. Remember he was willing to come to Atlanta. Remember you had an opportunity to get one of the greatest coaches of all time in any sport to lead this organization, but you didn't want to relinquish whatever power you think you have, which I don't understand what power you think you have because you haven't been to playoffs in, over 7 or 8 years? So I'm not sure there. So to fire Raheem Morris, to me, would be malpractice. All I'm saying is Raheem Morris and this year's Falcons isn't what the Falcons fans wanted them to be. Michael Penix was also on their list as an ACL tear, correct? This team, I think, is still moving in the right direction. You can't see it now. Now, if this is the Falcons of next year, then I understand people wanting him gone, even though I think you could still, based on how they progress. But you had somebody in the building that could have been the guy that you wanted, but you didn't want to relinquish that control. So now don't kick the man out of the door because he's not producing in his first full season here in Atlanta. All right, when we come back from the break, loyalty is a good thing, but sometimes in the NFL it can be the biggest hindrance. Coming back with my favorite segment of the show right after this. Welcome back into Mood to Change, and it's time for my favorite segment of the show. Let's not delay it any longer. It's time for my nonsense narrative. Run it. So the next man up mentality does mean something because you can't quit. Hey, so I just finished talking earlier on in the show about teams being prepared to win now and in the future. I think it's viable. I think the best teams, the best organizations operate that way. 80% of them don't, which is why you see what you see typically in the NFL. But this thing about loyalty, this thing about, you have to take care of your players and all this type of stuff, you've got to take care of the organization first. And you see this Pittsburgh Steelers video because the Steelers have been one of the benchmark organizations in all of sports, right? One of the best NFL franchises of all time. So many Super Bowls, so few head coaches, recipes for success. But I truly think them believing that Ben Roethlisberger was the guy 3 or 4 years before retirement. And I don't mean not being the starter. He could have still been the starter, which is what he was, but they didn't have somebody in terms of a succession plan at quarterback. And it's been what they've been dealing with for the last decade almost. And it's been an issue. I say that to say this. Kansas City is not in the playoffs. Patrick Mahomes has a torn ACL. And it could be one of the best things that's ever happened to the Kansas City Chiefs outside of winning 3 Super Bowls in 5 years. Because even when they were winning Super Bowls, I'm not the guy that's going to sit here and diminish them winning back-to-back Super Bowls because they didn't look the same that they looked with Tyreek Hill early on in Mahomes' era. That's dumb to me. They look like a championship team who've done it in a variety of different ways. But what I will say is the Travis Kelce's of the world, the Chris Jones of the world, the Matt Nagy's of the world, the Nick Boltons of the world, those have been stalwarts on this team, but it doesn't mean that you have to stay loyal to how this team is currently constructed. I think changes will need to be made, even if the Chiefs had won. The problem is I don't know if the Chiefs winning this year would have made them change anything. Because I've said this before, Howie Roseman doesn't sleep. And I think the Eagles are a team that is so well run to me because they're always looking for ways to improve themselves. And I'm not saying that the Chiefs haven't tried to do that. I'm not saying that they haven't drafted Josh Simmons at left tackle. They didn't go and get Jalen Moore. They did. They tried to replenish the offensive line after losing a guy like Joe Tooney. Just didn't happen the way they thought it would. They tried to go out and get guys like Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice in the draft, right? They went out and drafted well defensively. I'm not diminishing nor demeaning what they've done because it's gotten them to where they are. And this season, to me, is not the referendum. I'm simply saying that there have to be opportunities that loyalty cannot hinder. And I'm interested to see moving into the offseason how the Chiefs handle that. When we come back from the break, a defensive-minded head coach is one of the best in the league, and if he were an offensive-minded head coach, everybody would say so. Back with my final segment of the show, right after this. And welcome back in the Mood to Change. It's now time for the final segment of the show. It's time for the final drive. Being redundant is a good thing sometimes because you have to nail your point home. DeMeco Ryans needs to be respected. If he were an offensive-minded head coach, the way Sean McVay is heralded, the way Ben Johnson is heralded, even Mike McDonald is in the same category with DeMeco Ryans, but specifically DeMeco. If he were an offensive-minded head coach, he'd be one of the best head coaches in everybody's mind in the NFL. And in my mind, he's already that. All right, hey, don't forget, you can also catch us on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54. You can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's @move_the_chains. Make sure you leave a comment, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can know when we post another video. Hey, another banger for the best production crew in the business. I am your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. Always remember, build every day of your life brick by brick. Scan that QR code to take a look at the protection plan to help get your finances and your credit situated. And as always, until next time, right here on Move the Chains, God bless.